Hello and welcome to another free code session. My name is Jason Bach. It has been, I think, 3 or 4 months since I recorded one of these. I've been doing other things. I've started to stream a lot more. I've actually been streaming playing video games. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I started doing that with Alien Day. I played Alien Isolation, and that was a lot of fun streaming it. And surprisingly, my connection at home could handle it. I have a decent one, but I didn't know if with that and also my setup with my computer, if that was going to go over well or not. But I was just pleasantly surprised that it seemed to work well. So I've been doing that with a whole bunch of games, and I plan on continuing to do that because I enjoy it. It's fun. One of the things also that I was a little annoyed about with recording videos is for some reason my mic cable was causing little popping, crackling noises occasionally. And I would hear it in Camtasia when I would edit the video. But I started noticing when I was listening to some of the live videos on playback later on, I was also getting that. And so I troubleshooted it, and I figured out that it was an old cable, a cable I had probably since I was in high school, which is a long time ago. And I replaced that with a new one and solved the problem right away. So I'm hoping with this is my first recording now with Camtasia 2024 with the new cable, that everything sounds good. But I did a test recording before this and it seemed to sound fine. So that's good. So I'm looking forward to getting back into recording. Still going to do streaming. I still thoroughly enjoy doing that. And I may occasionally do some coding streams, but I'm going to start recording some videos again for FreeCodeSession. I do want to move towards also including doing some series videos talking about a specific topic over the course of 3, 4, 10. I don't know how many videos would there be depending on the topic. I already have a couple of ideas in place. I don't know if I'm going to get to this until 2025, just because it's a lot of work, and I want to make sure that content is a little bit more structured, not formal, but that there's a flow to it, and that everything is as correct as I can possibly make it. These videos are kind of a odd way of doing a stream because I have a plan, but it's also just reactionary. Sometimes you may have seen when I do these videos, I run into a problem and it takes 3 or 4 videos to figure some of this stuff out. But I want to do that because that shows just how software is. It can be messy, it can be tough, it can be frustrating, but it's also very satisfying when you get something to work the way that you want it to get you get something to work the way you want it to work. So yeah, I have now decided to come back to recording these. I have a whole bunch of things with rocks. Of course, it's going to be rocks, which I'm now using on a project at work. We decided to give it a whirl on a service that I've been working on for a couple months now, a whole bunch of integration stuff with other services. It's been kind of interesting. We've also used channels in .NET, and that's a very interesting and cool technology. So we've been using that to do a whole bunch of asynchronous communication in our service. So fun stuff. And I got the team to say, let's give this a whirl. And I also put in the caveat that if there was something in rocks that just did not work, it was going to cause us to fail massively, I would put in the extra time to use another framework or to figure out what the issue would be and make sure that I got to fix it as soon as possible. But it's worked really well. There's only been a very couple minor things that have popped up, and one was a bug, but it was very minor at best. And then there was another one that was, I think, also a bug, but it was just, I wasn't showing descriptions for members that were protected. The reflection code was only looking for public ones. So it would say, an expectation failed at, and then whatever the message was, and that was just blank. So You still knew that you missed an expectation, but you didn't know where or why. So minor case, fix that one. So it's nice to see that this is now kind of battle tested in a way, and it's held up rather well, in my opinion. I've actually been quite happy to see it actually working decently. So that's cool. So what is the plan for the next suite of videos I'm going to be working on? Oh, there's going to be a lot. There's a lot of things. I've broken it down into 2 milestones. So this video is just going to be about what is the work that I'm going to be doing in future videos. And then I'll actually start doing those in the next set of videos. So we're at 8.2.0 right now. And so there's going to be an 8.3, and then 9.0 is going to be one that will align with, at least it can't come out until .NET 9 is out. And that's because one of the things I'm going to do in there is dependent upon a feature that's coming in C# 13 .NET 9. By the way, it is completely just happenstance that the numbers are currently aligning with the version of .NET, and we'll do that with 9. That's pure coincidence. I don't do that on purpose. I never wanted to do that on purpose, but it's just so happened that over time they've come to align this way. So just wanted to make that clear. Some people do that with their frameworks. I think that's kind of odd to do that, but it's just ended up happening. So I'm going to talk about the things that will be in this minor 8.3 release and then 9.0. I'm not going to talk about all the things in 9.0 because some of them are things that I just keep pushing out because they're not really that big of a deal. But so I might not get through all those, but I'll talk about the major ones. So with 8.3.0, I'm also going to start to use a feature branch, which I've not done in the past, and just because I've never needed to. But I think with this one, I want to make sure that the main is basically what is released. And with the work here, I want that separate in case something does come in with what's currently released. And then I can, push and cherry pick and from other branches and stuff like that as needed. So most of these are minor, but I'm going to go through them anyway. So updating the project, there's a couple things in here that I should change and I haven't done yet. I'm creating a separate, what they call a snup keg, where you put your symbols in a separate package, and really shouldn't do that. It's not wrong, but you can embed the debug information into the package, and that's what I'm going to do. So I just need to change that. You don't need this anymore with .NET 8. It just happens. So you get source linking automatically. At least that's the way I understand it. So I don't need that reference anymore. And there's this new thing called NuGet auditing, and it has to do with security and vulnerabilities. So I'm going to add that at least to the Rocks project, if not all the projects within. I may not do it for all of them because some of the code gen project that does testing on a whole bunch of different packages that has so many dependencies on other projects that it may get to be very noisy if they start having security vulnerabilities. It really just matters for Rocks because that's what's actually getting shipped out and published to NuGet. But either way, I'm going to do it at least for the Rocks project. We'll talk about this one next. Create rock attributes. So stuff that's going to be coming in 9, or at least the plan for 9, is basically making me think that I need to redo the attributes. Right now I have rock create, rock make, I have generic and non-generic versions. And as you can see, there's something about closed generics and stuff like that, that I think I'm basically going to consolidate everything down. I'm going to create a new attribute that just says rock. And actually, now that I look at this, this is wrong. This should be that. You pass in the type. There's no generic version anymore. And that's because I'm going to consider supporting static abstract members. Talk about that in a moment. And then a kind. I'm not sure if I'll have it default to create. I kind of like things being explicit. So I may just leave that as not being optional. And then it will say if you give a generic type definition, they can't be closed generics. Okay, I'm disallowing that as well. this one would automatically start doing that. And again, I'll talk about this in a moment. So this would also say that the other attributes will now be declared as obsolete and a warning on them. So if you're using them, you just need to switch to this and using this. And at work, that just means instead of saying rock create or rock make, we would just say rock, and it would take us about 2 minutes to fix. I could make a code fix, but you technically should have a code fix in a different assembly, and I really just don't want to go through that pain to do this. So I'll have in the obsolete thing, to say, please move to using rock attribute or whatever I put in there in the comment. So this will be nice because then it will just say rock your type is the way I'm thinking about this. You'll just say rock type of whatever it is that you want to mock, and then you pass in the kind and saying create, and that's it. And if you want both, then this will be a flag. So you could say I want to create and I want to make generated as well. That's that work there. We also are going to be creating a closed generic analyzer. I do not want, and even with this new attribute, because you could put in type of list of string or I list of string or something like that. I don't want closed generics anymore. So this is going to start setting the tone of, if you're doing this, stop doing it, because it's a thing that's going to happen in 9. But I found with supporting open generics that which I could have done. I mean, I could have had the infrastructure in rocks always looking for types, not type parameters. And then it still would have allowed you to say, I list a string. So the problem is that you end up with these type names, like I list create expectations of string, and then it would be of int, of GUID, and now that I've got open generic supported, it really doesn't make sense to allow closed generics. You should just say, what is the generic type that you want? And then when you create a set of expectations, you pass in how to close that generic on the expectations. It's much cleaner that way. So I think I'm going to just start moving this to being a warning, and then a 9 that will now be an error. And the last one here for 8.3 is I do have a bug. I found that if you have a method, and I think it could be a method on a class or a interface, doesn't matter, but where that type parameter isn't constrained, okay, but you then use it as a nullable type, you start getting errors on the mock, because you basically need to say that that you have to have a default constraint in place. So if you do where team members default on the overriding method, then it works. Okay. So I did a little bit of experimentation on a type here and kind of generalized it. And only in this case, all the rest of them doesn't matter. Only in that case. So if you don't have any constraints on the type parameter and you use it as nullable, then you need to throw this in there. So I think I can manage that. The other thing, though, I got to be careful of is where you have kind of this recursive descent. What happens if you have an expression of a func of team member ? Because that's where I think I originally found it, and it's from something called CVS. I have it up here. CVS Helper, which Josh Close is the creator of that framework, and I actually worked with him many years ago. He lives in the Twin Cities, and he's maintained this for many, many years. And he's not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing something where you do this. It's just when you override it, and the helper in Visual Studio to say override members will put default there. So it's doing the right thing. Rocks isn't. I think it should be simple to figure this out. I just need to be careful of where that type parameter is being used and keep digging into to the type definitions to make sure I find it. And then I just need to I already have a method in there that will create the set of constraints that you need for a type parameter. And then in this case, it would just need to make sure that it has default there as well. So hopefully this is a small fix, and it really, I mean, it doesn't affect anything other than if you do something like this. But that is possible. That is legal C#. There's nothing wrong with it. So I need to address that. Okay. So that will be 8.3. 9.0 is going to be a lot. And there's going to be some pretty big features in there. So one of them is what I've already talked about, which is only allowing open generics. This one actually, I mean, it is a breaking change, but I think it's the right thing to do because you shouldn't be making these closed generic types. This will also get me away from some code that I already have in Rocks. I don't have to support that anymore. I can get rid of that. Not a lot, but there's definitely going to be some there that I can remove. So that's good. So I'm doing this because I think it's correct. And then also that analyzer will be changed to making the detection of using a closed generic an error. You should just make it open. That's the right thing to do. So that's that one. Let's see. Yeah, removing existing attributes. Based on the work I'm going to be doing, these are going to be removed entirely, both the generic and non-generic. The only one that would be left is rock attribute. So this is removing some code, having to change the generator so that's only looking for that one attribute. But that'll make things, in my mind, correct. So that'll be good. So I talk about open generics. This one's kind of interesting. I don't know if I'm going to actually follow through with this, but I found out that you can put this comment above a raw string literal, and or at least Visual Studio will colorize it. And I guess it also works with string syntax attribute. I don't know if this is like an experimental thing. So I think it's just trying to just do colorization. Like if you do that with JSON, it will actually tell you if the JSON doesn't parse. But parsing JSON compared to parsing C# and making sure it's correct, it feels like it's a little bit different. So I wouldn't expect this to be semantically, that it would try to make sure your code is semantically correct, because I don't know how it would be able to do that. But it should be able to find that syntactically correct. I think I tried this and I took off a semicolon and it didn't tell me that anything was wrong. But it still colorizes things. And so it's kind of interesting. It also highlights the code. And at first that was a little jarring, but I think the reason why they do that is because they want to show that this is different than real code, because it looks like real code because it's going to be colorized as such. And so now, how do you tell that difference from other code? It could get really confusing. So having that being a little jarring, I think, is actually correct so that you can see that it's different. So I might do this. Small thing, but it was kind of an interesting thing to find on somebody's website. Static abstract members and interfaces. I had looked at this before. I mean, this is something that, I thought I had this issue in there for a while. I think I might have just been thinking about it, but I think now is the time to actually do this. So this is going to be a lot of work. I think this is, but it's necessary because it's now that I'm getting away also from having a generic version of my rock attributes. The only way to pass in an interface that has static abstract members is through a type of. You can't do it through a generic parameter or a type parameter. So that makes this a little bit more supported. There are some things I have to be very careful about, because how do you mock a static member? Well, with this, there's no tricks I have to do because the member is on the interface. The problem is that if you have multiple tests running in parallel, how do you differentiate between calling a static member? And so I have to look at using something like async local and storing expectations up there, but then the user has to be cognizant and careful that they're calling verify at the end of every test, because if they don't, then things can get confusing as to what's actually in your async execution context with async local. So there is another issue related to this, where I've thought of making the expectations disposable. And I actually did this and then I removed it and I was going to do it. And then this got in the way. And then, there's also something, I think I actually tried this and recorded a video with it, and changing the code, especially in the integration test, something started getting really ugly with it. And yeah, I decided to move away from it. But it would help in enforcement to make sure that you're actually trying to call verify, especially if there is a code. There's an analyzer out there that will look to see if you're not calling dispose. So I might go back and doing this. Otherwise, you're going to have to do try finallys and call. But you only have to do it in the case where you are having static abstract members. If you don't call verify, that's kind of on you, but it's not going to cause anything wrong. With static members, it might. So, you're always going to have to call it, even if some code in between failed. That's why I'm still considering this and going to be kind of pushing it again, because you have to clean things up, which maybe that means that, you call this, but you still call verify. But if you don't call verify, dispose will only do things like, actually, now I talk about this, having them be disposable would force any cleanup if needed, but it wouldn't call verify for you. So that might actually be the right thing to do now that I think about it. So I may do this as well, but doing this work is going to be quite a lot. The last major one here is actually kind of interesting. This is something I've had open for a couple of years, but the whole ref struct thing is annoying in rocks because you can't pass in a ref struct to a generic parameter. And this actually becomes problematic the more span of T and read-only span of T are being used in .NET. Now, you may not be passing it in, but you may have a method that's saying span of T. And what I need to do is then pass span of T into argument of T. But that doesn't work because span of T is a ref struct. So I've had to gin all this code to support ref structs, and it works. So, ref structs do work in rocks, but it's all this code gen I have to do. Well, now in C# 13, they're adding anti-constraints, or what you're going to see as something where you do allows. Okay, I'll zoom in on that a little bit. This is saying that T can take a ref struct, okay, assuming that you handle things the way you should with a ref struct. I already know I'm doing this correctly with the generated code I have. So I started playing with this and I'm like, I can now move all my stuff to one set of types. In the case where I run into a ref struct, I would just use one of these. Cool, that makes things easier. But even better yet, what I realized is my existing argument of T, I can do an anti-constraint where you expand what is allowed for a T and just do it there. Predicate of T already in .NET 9 has an anti-constraint on it. So I don't need my own argument evaluation. I could just use predicate of T like I am in argument of T. This is the only one that I might need to keep around. I'm not sure yet. I still have to do some work, but I think what this will do, this feature, is it's not going to make a new feature. It's going to improve an existing one, because I no longer have to do this special code generation for ref structs. That's going to go away. I no longer have to check in my code that if it's a ref struct, then make sure I'm putting in the right type name here and doing all that stuff. It's all going to be argument of T. So that helps, except with pointers. Pointers still are a special case. I still have to handle pointers in a special way, which kind of sucks, but that's just, I went down that road before and I couldn't generalize that to one type, which was sad. but yeah, I still have that in the back of my head that I might try to revisit that and make that where I don't have to do so much code gen. But then that would be the only thing for it. Ref structs wouldn't need that anymore. They could just use argument of T. So that gets rid of a whole bunch of code gen. That gets rid of special one-offs. So it might make code gen a little faster, probably not much at all. I'm also interested to see what this does at runtime with running the code using the code gen stuff that I would create for ref structs as compared to just using argument of T, and seeing if there's a slight difference there. So this one just makes the feature better, but it's going to delete a lot of code in rocks, which the best code you write is the code you don't have to maintain. And if I can get rid of that, then that's less stuff that's in there. I think it's going to clean some stuff up. So this is why though there's a 9.0 that's going to tie to 9, because this is coming in C# 13. So, and I'm almost like 99% convinced this is going to stay. It could get removed. I'm recording this video in mid-July, and it's possible from this time to August, in 4 months that maybe they find something that they go, we got to pull this feature. So if it gets pulled, it's no big deal, because this feature for rocks is isolated. If I'd have to back it out, I'd back it out. No big deal. But it would be nice to get this to work. So that is the plan for rocks in the future. All this work is going to, be lots of videos to work on and create. And again, I enjoy doing it because I like showing the process of actually building things and getting into place, the struggle it sometimes takes to figure out what actually works and what doesn't. And yeah, it's fun stuff. I enjoy sharing, not just to show what I'm doing, but also to see what, have conversations with other people and see what their questions are, and potentially that may lead to other things to talk about in the future. So with all that said, thank you for watching. Leave comments and questions below. See you in the next episode.